everybody. So welcome to episode 3 of Tutor Chat with myself, Helen, and Lucy Kennedy, we are both from the 11 Plus English Club. So in today's lesson, I'm so in that habit of saying lesson.
We're definitely teachers, aren't we?
So old habits die hard. So in today's session, we are going to be talking about the 5 things that you and your children should be doing in terms of mock exams and preparing for mocks. So again, we're recording this in the sort of middle of June. So this is really a bit of a peak season for people doing mocks, and we get lots of questions about it. And inside the 11 Plus English Club, we also host our own mock exams. So we have lots of experience of doing this with you guys. So Lucy is going to start us off just one of the first main tips that we have for you.
Yes, thank you very much, Helen. So first off, you guys are probably familiar with this. Then again, you might not be. There are lots of past papers available, free ones to download as like PDFs on the internet, online. So obviously, you would need to think about the exam board, exam style. You'll be thinking about the schools. If it's private schools, then you can literally find usually familiarization papers or past papers or whatever on their websites. It's usually under admissions. You then look for kind of 11 plus or year 7 entry. There'll be quite a few resources on there. And then literally just give them a go at home. I would say, I don't know, Helen, what do you think? I would say personally, if you're sitting one style of exam, there are benefits to just sticking with the one style, but actually exploring other styles and content can help give like a broader knowledge. What do you think?
Especially if you're on like a bit of a budget and you maybe want to sort of try out more of the free papers. Look, I don't think there's necessarily too much benefit in, for example, so you're doing CSSE, which is local to us, which is more like standard format, long sort of comprehension things. Going and doing like a short style multiple choice CEM exam might not be great in terms of actual exam practice, great from an English skills point of view, but I think, Lucy, you mentioned about like the private schools and things like that. They're really great for sharing familiarization papers, and I actually think they're often slightly more challenging than perhaps some of the 11 plus ones. So I think they're a really good resource to use instead. But you want to find something sort of as sort of close and familiar as possible, I guess, the exam you're actually doing.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would definitely say keep it going with past papers, practice papers at home. Just don't do too many. Like it hasn't got to be overkill. You haven't got to be like, the more past papers you do, the more confident you're going to feel. It kind of works the opposite way, I think. So I would say just do one. We kind of touched on this last week, like one every few weeks, one. It could be like once per month. It could be once a term. Like it depends how specific and condensed your study is going to be. But yeah, and just use each of those scores and papers as almost like a plan, like a mini plan as to what you're going to look at going forward. But yeah, there's lots of stuff out there online that you can get hold of, and it's just a good way of practice but also tracking progress.
And a really great way to sort of Google search for these free papers is to literally search for 11 plus practice paper, but then make sure you put PDF at the end of it as well, because that tells Google to, rather than pulling up websites that are maybe going to get you to like pay for the papers, you can actually, if you type in PDF, it'll tell Google to pull through all the websites which actually just have like a downloadable PDF on them. That said, this all depends on your budget, doesn't it? And it's great to do these freebies, but equally there's always quality in buying papers, especially ones that have been like professionally written and things like that. So we think it's good to have like a bit of a balance of both. Really, we sort of promote both sides. Okay, fab. Thanks, Lucy. So also as well, another big thing in terms of the marking, so we've talked about like, where to get the papers and how regularly to do them, but really I think one of the most important things about doing the mocks is the actual marking side of it, like that's really what you're doing, is to get that score and that feedback from it. So first of all, what we really recommend is do the paper. We're going to talk a little bit about like exam conditions and things in a moment, but do the paper and then sort of close it, walk away, go and have a break, just like they would do like in the real thing. So I think it's good to kind of let them almost sort of deflate almost a little bit after, you know, like, because it's quite intense for them doing that work and keeping to timings and things like that. So let them have a little break. But then when it comes to marking, we always recommend, and again, this is a huge thing we do inside the 11 Plus English Club, is we try and teach our kids how to mark their own work, especially creative writing. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a skill, you know, as teachers, we've been mastering it for years, but that doesn't mean it's inaccessible to students and parents to at least have a go at it themselves. And I think the real value in the kids being able to mark their own work is, one, they'll pick up on little silly mistakes quite quickly. And actually, if they get a little bit frustrated with their own silly mistakes, that's 10 times more likely to stick in their heads, and then they'll change that or amend that for the next time. There's an element, I think, of accountability with it. Like when they mark it themselves, they're taking responsibility, they're like building their own self-awareness. And that's the main thing, really, building that self-awareness for them to recognize where they've done well and maybe where they could improve upon. And I think as well, at the end, when you've got the score, one of the best things to do with the kids is to get them to, you know, on the back of the page, get them to write down, what are 3 things I did really well in this paper. Like, make them celebrate, make them recognize what their achievements are. Because, you know, sometimes with kids, you ask them, what did you do well? Oh, nothing. So sometimes you need to tease it out of them a little bit. And then on the other side, 3 things, not that they did wrong, but 3 things that they could improve upon, or 3 things that they would like to practice for next time. So then what we like to do then is, then when it comes to the next mock, we say, right, before we do this mock, what were those 3 things that we talked about last time that we need to remember to do this time? So the idea is, every mock they do, those skills are improving, the self-awareness is improving, and they're getting better and better each time. So it's a nice sort of steady process to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. So next up, tip number 3 is to treat mock exams, mock papers as you would the real thing. So be quite strict with things like timings. But to be honest with you, most of the time it's about finding a space that is free from disruption, if possible. We understand that's, you know, it's not always possible if there's other siblings and, you know, lots going on in the house. We understand that that's sometimes not possible, but to the best of your ability, find somewhere that is free from disruption. It's quiet, there's adequate space, there's good lighting, fresh air if possible. They've got their glass of water or juice or whatever they have. No distractions, as in no TVs on, no music, literally nothing else that is going to send a signal to your brain, because you just want to focus just on that paper in front of you and reading those instructions and then figuring out, you know, how to navigate through the paper. Timings, obviously every paper is different. If you're doing CSSE, for example, then your child should be working towards the whole 10 minutes reading and then 60 minutes to finish the paper. It's going to vary between different subjects and papers and schools and exam boards, but basically just encourage your child to be self-aware, but also aware of things like instructions, and just get them to practice reading through those instructions, making sure that they do understand what they're being asked to do. And just making sure there's no confusion, because obviously if you start something in a really, you know, hazy headspace, it's going to be a lot harder basically to work through than it would if you're like, nope, okay, I know what I have to do. This is my time. This is my section. Let's go. It's a lot easier to do that. And within timings comes the need for some kind of clock, watch. Within most exams, they're not allowed smartwatches, so things like Apple Watches and stuff, they're not allowed. But just get them used to working under time constraints. So could literally be like an alarm clock, or could be an alarm on your phone, or just a good old analog clock on the wall. So
Yeah.
just to keep up to date.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because I think like in school the kids are so used to, being given a task and sort of told, right, on you go. And again,
Yeah.
they don't really have to. I mean, I hate to say this. I think a lot of kids are looking at the clock to work out when break time or lunchtime is.
Yes, I can remember doing the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was very good at knowing, quarter to 11 and 12:30.
Yeah.
But I think like in terms of like accountability for sort of, managing their own time, this is a skill that kids aren't really taught that much in school. So I think, following on from like what Lucy's saying, having a watch or something to them is, again, when they sit down to do that mock, say to them, right, look at the clock, what is the time? If we start at say 12:30, what time do you have to start reading? What time do you have to move on to comprehension? What time do you do this? What time do you do that? So again, and perhaps as well, the first time they do those few mocks, just when they're sort of going through their paper, just ask them every now and again, how long have you got left? How long have you got left? Because what we find when we do the mocks is so often the kids are sort of messaging us or trying to get in, sort of putting their hands up saying, how long? And we try and say to them, look, we're not going to be there on the day, like you can't rely on us to manage the timing. So again, super duper important they sort of practice that by themselves.
And to be honest, that is a long-term skill, because you take that with you throughout every exam you sit, whether that's, GCSEs, A levels or degree level, whatever. There are always invigilators that just say, okay, you've got an hour, you finish at this time, and that's it. And you're left to your own devices pretty much to get yourself through that paper on time.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah, 100%.
yeah.
I used to tutor for GCSE, and honestly, one of the biggest things was always, especially in the big language exams, big creative writing tasks and things, they would always run out of time. So yeah, it's such an important skill to get on at sort of an early age. Perfect. Okay, and as well, just sort of following on, I guess sort of Lucy mentioned this a little bit at the beginning when she was talking about like tracking scores and things like that, is it's so important, I think, for yourself and the kids to see mocks as like a revision tool. So we've talked about this before with you guys about using mock exams as a way of highlighting like areas of weakness and things like that, and areas that maybe they need to do a bit more practice on. But honestly, I think one of the main things is, don't look at their mock scores and treat it as this is it. This is going to be their standardized score. This is how this is how they're going to rank. Because again, remember, when they're doing a mock test, potentially there's 30, 50, maybe 100 kids doing that little mock. That is such a small sample of actually the total amount of kids that are doing it. And also as well, like one thing I always say to families, like perspective wise, the families who are signing their kids up to do these mock exams are the parents and the families who are maybe taking it very seriously. They're really sort of, it's really a focus and a goal for them to get into those grammar schools. So the likelihood is that those kids are going to be the kind of top end of the kids taking the test. That little mock practice hall is not a reflection of all the work that all the other thousands of people who might end up doing the 11 plus are doing.
Yeah. It's
so
true.
again, it's taking it with a bit of a pinch of salt. And again, I think I told this story last time. I worked with a family who, that their child didn't necessarily sort of pass, so to speak, any of the mocks, and there was a little bit of concern about it, but on the day was absolutely fine, passed and got into grammar school. So it just shows you that those papers we did were so great to help us identify the areas of weakness, but I never once sat down and said, this score means you're not going to pass. It just means we need to pick up a few more marks here and here across the paper.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, final tip is to almost have a break from doing any style of mock exam or practice paper before the exams. So don't forget, children will be going back to school in those last few weeks before their actual exams. So, and that with that comes its own pressures and stresses, and there's going to be quite a lot going on in their lives at that particular time. So what you want to try and do is keep things as stable and as consistent as possible, and to try and minimize any stresses. And one of those triggers for stress can be, unfortunately, sitting a mock exam paper a few days before your exam, okay, self-marking it or getting, mum, dad to mark it, and the score comes back at, I don't know, 70% or 65%, something that basically you feel isn't very good and you need to improve on, even if your child doesn't or suggest that they're not too bothered about it, it will still leave some kind of imprint with them, like, that's the kind of score I'm going to get in a few days' time. And we just want to try and minimize any kind of extra pressure on them, because they've already got so much going on, and this is like, we're at the final hurdle now, and throughout summer, and they would have put so much time into this. We don't want to sway it either way just because of mindset before the exam. We don't want to do that for them. So yeah, just let them go back to school, let them keep ticking over with their school homework. If you want to do things like vocabulary practice and discussion about different things that you've read and articles and whatever, that's absolutely fine, because you can build it in naturally into your daily lives. But don't have them sitting doing mock exams in those first few weeks of September leading up to exam season. It's too risky.
Yeah, and I think, by that point as well, there's an element of like, what's done is done,
Yeah.
like the sort of preparation's been done. And let's be honest, I think, a lot of families we work with, they haven't necessarily started preparing sort of directly at the last minute. They've been doing it for quite a long time. So like, trust yourselves as well, and your children will know as well, like what are the areas that they've consistently maybe found a bit challenging. So for example, in English, I don't know, it might be like in creative writing, like thinking of metaphors or personification examples, something like that, like getting them to identify it, or even vocabulary and a bit of spellings. Maths, I know a common one is like percentages and things like that. So
yeah,
identifying those areas that they may find a bit tricky, and again, spending those weeks just 10-20 minutes a day just brushing up and doing a little bit of extra practice. But yeah, as Lucy says, it's not worth it. And actually, like, I've heard of exam test centers sort of gradually doing more and more like the mocks sort of get trickier and trickier as they go along, which again I think is a good idea up until sort of August time. But I often say to families I work with, don't go do the difficult mock in September, because honestly, I've never worked with a family who's done a difficult mock in September and it's been a positive thing. If anything, I've had to sit down and have that chat of, no, please don't undo 12 months of hard work here. It's not worth it.
Yeah, it's too much. There's too many emotions going on at that time, and it's too risky.
Definitely. Okay, all right guys, so we hope that you found that helpful with our mainly the list of 5 things that you should be doing with your mocks, but we threw in a couple of don'ts there as well. As always, if you have any questions about mocks or your 11 plus preparation, please let us know. Inside the 11 plus English Club, we're going to be doing another mock for CSSE on the 16th of July on the Saturday morning. That is free for our members, so anyone in year 5 is welcome to come along to that. But if you're not a member of the 11 plus English Club, then you can still pay and come along separately if you want to. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you very soon for episode 4.
Thanks guys, take care, bye.